CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now. Ed, it is 2 p.m. here on the East Coast. This presser just wrapped. You were in the room. Talk to us about what stood out to you about what they did and did not say.
Well, the conversation there, especially at the end, about how exactly to continue engaging both Ukraine and Russia over the future of their conflict, signaled yet again that there is at least some disagreement on how exactly to continue proceeding. President Macron making clear he thinks that engaging Russian President Putin is important, if only for logistical reasons, to avoid confrontation, to ensure the safety of nuclear plants and whatnot. But President Biden making clear yet again he will not ever sit with the Russian leader unless or until he's willing to negotiate a withdrawal from Ukraine. That plus some interesting issues that have arisen in recent weeks over the Inflation Reduction Act, or that massive piece of legislation, a big priority for the president and the Democratic Party to get passed before the midterm elections. The French pointing out that there are some issues with it because it could detrimentally affect the European and the French economies, and the president saying they're going to work on essentially fixing some typos or some misinterpretations in the legislation that caused the French to be so concerned, and for the French president here in Washington yesterday to call it an aggressive piece of legislation, which in diplomatic speak is an aggressive tone to take. So beyond that, though, attempts to sort of restore or sustain the relationship between the two countries, as they both pointed out, the longest running allyship between the United States and another country, and a successful one. And it'll continue later today with other conversations that the French president will have with the vice president over at the State Department, and then there'll be a state dinner here in the White House later tonight. But as President Macron said, a frank and respectful exchange of views on a variety of issues, which is what they were seeking, and we'll see going forward, especially on the issue of Ukraine, how these two are able to stay on the same page.
Yeah, and Ed, it was interesting to hear President Biden on the Inflation Reduction Act say that, quote, the U.S. makes no apology for it. He said that there are, he used the word glitches, and tweaks we can make that can make it easier for European countries to participate. So, Ed, other than the Inflation Reduction Act, what are the other, perhaps, areas of potential contention between the two countries, or is that really it at this point?
That certainly is an immediate one, given that concerns about economic development and creating jobs is an issue not only here in the United States, of course, but across Europe, given that the war is ongoing, given that inflation is so much more acute in that part of the world than it is here right now. And so that plus Ukraine essentially are perhaps the two most obvious sticking points. But beyond that, as they pointed out, there's a lot of cooperation on a host of other issues, especially development issues in the third world, in Africa especially, the work in the Pacific with Asian countries in Australia, and just really a hope that the two of them can continue working together on those issues and others going forward.
And on the flip side, Ed, they're trying to, because this is the first official state visit, put a positive spin on the relationship as well. President Biden reiterated his growing friendship with his French counterpart. We know the state dinner tonight will have some 300 guests. I guess it's so big, they're going to have it outside. Speak to us about what else we expect to see today.
Well, this is the first state dinner of the Biden presidency. Remember, they haven't been able to have one because of COVID. So they've been eager to hold these kinds of events, and it comes amid a series of other holiday-themed activities here at the White House. The lighting of the Christmas tree out on the Ellipse last night. There's the Kennedy Center Honors this weekend that the president hosts a banquet for the honorees. There will be a series of holiday parties over the next few weeks for members of Congress and others here in Washington. But the state dinner, as you said, 300 guests being held out on the back lawn, the south lawn, under a tent. And our Wei Zhejiang caught this great detail earlier today. Usually at a state dinner, if it's held down the hall in a state dining room, they'd bring out some of the fine china, maybe some of the china used or commissioned by previous presidents. But because it's being held outside, they can't actually bring the china outside the house. So they've essentially gone for some rentals, and will be using somebody else's cutlery tonight because it's such a big dinner, and because there's some protocol and understanding that given the historic nature of that china, they don't take it outside the house into the outdoors, especially in the cold weather.
Yeah, I imagine you don't want to be that person that accidentally trips on the driveway and drops a piece of that china. Ed O'Keefe for us in the East Room of the White House. Ed, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Take care.